Chapter 5. What seeks the Witcher on my territory? Fulca Altaverde, the prefect of Riedbrunner, repeated the question, now clearly impatient with the lengthening silence. Whence is the Witcher coming? And whither is he headed? With what purpose? That's what comes of playing at good deeds, thought Geralt, looking at the prefect's face, which was marked with thickened scars. That's what comes of playing the noble Witcher out of compassion for a bunch of shabby forest folk. That's what comes of the desire for luxury and sleeping in taverns where there's always a narc. That's what comes of travelling with a loud-mouthed poetaster. Here I sit in a room like a windowless cell, and a hard interrogation chair bolted to the floor, and on the chair's back, it's impossible not to notice, are cuffs and leather straps, for binding the arms and restraining the neck. They haven't been used yet, but they're there. How the bloody hell do I get myself out of this pickle now? After 5 days of trekking with the Riverdalian forest beekeepers, they finally emerged from the wilderness onto a boggy reed bed. It stopped raining. The wind dispersed the mists and clammy fog. The sun broke through the clouds, and mountain peaks sparkled snow-white in the glare. If a short while ago the river Yaruga had signified to them a clear dividing line, a border, the crossing of which represented an evident passage to the next more serious stage of the expedition, it was even more so now. The sense that they were approaching a limit, a barrier, a place which could only be turned back from. They all felt it, Geralt above all. It could only be thus, since from dawn to dusk they had been faced with a mighty, jagged range of mountains barring their way, rising up in front of them to the south, and gleaming with snow and glaciers. The Amel Mountains. And rising even above the saw-toothed Amel was the forbiddingly majestic obelisk of Mount Gorgon, Devil Mountain, as angular as the blade of a misericord. They did not talk about it, didn't discuss it, but Geralt felt what everybody was thinking. For when he looked at the Amel Range and Gorgon, the thought of continuing the journey southwards seemed sheer insanity. Fortunately, it suddenly turned out there would be no need to head south. This news was brought to them by the shaggy forest beekeeper, owing to whom they had acted as the train's armed escort for the previous 5 days. The husband and father of the comely Hamadryads, next to whom he looked like a wild boar beside 2 mares. He who had tried to deceive them by saying the druids of Caed-Du had gone to the slopes. It was the day after their arrival in Riedbrunner, a town teeming like an anthill, and the destination of the forest beekeepers and trappers from Riverdale. It was the day after parting with the forest beekeepers for whom the Witcher was no longer needed. He hadn't expected to see any of them again. His astonishment was thus all the greater. For the forest beekeeper began with effusive expressions of gratitude and the handing to Geralt of a full pouch of mainly small change, his Witcher's fee. He accepted it, feeling on him the somewhat mocking gaze of Regis and Caer, to whom he had occasionally moaned during the trek about human ingratitude and stressed the pointlessness and stupidity of selfless altruism. And then the excited beekeeper literally shouted out the news. Mistletoes? The druids, are camped, dear Master Witcher, in the oak groves by Loch Mondwyn, a lake, get my drift, 35 miles from here in a westerly direction. The beekeeper had heard these tidings at a honey and beeswax trade market from a relative living in Riedbrunner, while the relative had been given the information from a diamond prospector, acquaintance of his. When the beekeeper learned about the druids, he ran as quickly as he could to tell the Witcher, and now he was glowing with happiness, pride, and a sense of importance, like every liar when his lies accidentally turn out to be true. At first, Geralt had intended to make for Loch Mondwyn without a moment's delay, but the company protested vehemently. Being in possession of the money from the beekeepers, declared Regis and Caer, and being in a town where anything could be bought, they ought to stock up on victuals and supplies. And buy extra arrows, added Milva, because they were always demanding game from her, and she weren't going to shoot whittle sticks. And spend at least 1 night in a bed in an inn, added Dandelion, and retired to that bed bathed and pleasantly tipsy on ale. The druids, they chorused, won't run away. Utter coincidence though it may be, added the vampire Regis with a curious smile, our company is on exactly the right road and heading in exactly the right direction, for since we are clearly and absolutely destined to encounter the Druids, a day or two's delay makes no difference. And as regards haste, he added philosophically, the impression that time is quickly running out is customarily a warning signal enjoining one to reduce the pace and proceed slowly and with due prudence. Geralt didn't protest or argue with the vampire's philosophy, although the weird nightmares he was being haunted by still inclined him towards haste, despite his being unable to recollect them after waking. It was the 17th of September, and a full moon. 6 days remained until the autumn equinox. Milva, Regis, and Caer took upon themselves the task of making purchases and acquiring the necessary equipment. Geralt and Dandelion, however, were to reconnoitre and gather information in the town of Riedbrunner. Situated in a bend in the river Nevi, Riedbrunner was a small town, if one only took into consideration the densely grouped brick and wooden buildings inside the ring of earthen embankments bristling with a palisade. But the serried buildings inside the embankments were currently merely the centre of the town, and no more than 1/10 of the population could live there. 9/10 resided in the noisy ocean of ramshackle huts, shacks, cabins, sheds, tents, and wagons, serving as dwellings which surrounded the embankments. The Witcher and the Poet were served by Cicerone in the form of the beekeeper's relative. Young, artful, and arrogant, a typical specimen of an urban layabout, who'd been born in the gutter and was no stranger to bathing nor slaking his thirst there. This stripling was like a trout in a crystal-clear mountain stream in the urban hubbub, throng, grime, and stench, and the chance to show someone around his repugnant town clearly delighted him. Unconcerned that nobody was asking him any questions, the gutter snipe gave enthusiastic explanations. He explained that Riedbrunner was an important stage for Nilfgaardian settlers travelling northwards after the endowment pledged by the Emperor. 6 oxgangs, or roughly 120 acres, and on top of that, a 10-year tax moratorium. For Riedbrunner lay at the mouth of the Dol Nevi Valley, which cuts through the Amel Mountains via the Theodula Pass, linking the slopes and Riverdale with Magturga, Giso, Metina, and Mecht, all countries for many years subordinate to the Nilfgaardian Empire. The town of Riedbrunner, explained the gutter snipe, was the last place where the settlers could depend on something else and not just themselves, their womenfolk, and what they had in their wagons, which is why most of the settlers remained camped outside the town for quite some time, gathering their strength before the last push to the banks of the Yaruga and beyond. And many of them, he added, with the pride of a slum patriot, settled in the town permanently, because the town was, why, culture, not some yokelish dump stinking of dung. In truth, the town of Riedbrunner's stench drew on many smells, dung included. Geralt had been there years before, but couldn't recognize it. Too much had changed. Previously, there hadn't been so many cavalrymen in black armour and cloaks with silver emblems on their spaulders. Previously, the Nilfgaardian tongue had not been heard on all sides. Previously, there hadn't been a quarry outside the town, where now ragged, dirty, haggard and bloodied people split boulders into ashlars and rubble, whipped by black-uniformed overseers. A large force of Nilfgaardian soldiers are stationed here, explained the gutter snipe, but not permanently, only during breaks in marches and searches for the partisans of the Free Slopes organization. They'll be setting up a powerful Nilfgaardian garrison here when a great stone stronghold is constructed on the site of the old castle. A stronghold built of stone hard-won from the quarry. The people splitting the stone are prisoners of war, from Lyria, from Aedion, and lately from Sodden, Brugge and Angren, and Temeria. 400 prisoners are employed here in Riedbrunner. A good 500 work in the ore quarries, underground and open-cast mines, in the vicinity of Belhaven, and over 1,000 are building bridges and levelling roads in the Theodula Pass. There had also been a scaffold in the town square when Geralt had visited, but a much more modest one. There hadn't been so many devices arousing hideous associations on it, and there hadn't been so many revolting and putrid decorations hanging from the gallows, stakes, forks, and poles. That's thanks to Mr. Fulco Artevelde, the prefect recently installed by the military authorities, explained the gutter snipe, looking at the scaffold and the fragments of human anatomy gracing it. Mr. Fulco had given the hangman business again. There's no fooling around with Mr. Fulco, he added. He's a stern master. The diamond prospector, the gutter snipe's mate, who they found in the tavern, didn't make a good impression on Geralt, for he happened to be in that tremblingly pale, half-sober, half-drunk, half-real, almost nightmarish state which drinking for several nights and days without stopping puts a fellow into. The witch's heart sank. It looked as though the sensational news about the Druids might have originated in simple delirium tremens. The drink-sodden prospector answered their questions astutely, however, and with good sense. He wittily retorted to Dandelion's accusation that he didn't look like a diamond prospector by saying that he would if he ever found a diamond. He described the dwelling place of the Druids by Loch Mondwyn explicitly and precisely, without exaggerated embellishment or an overinflated fantasizing manner. He took the liberty of asking what his interlocutors wanted from the Druids, and, when treated to a contemptuous silence, warned them that entering the Druidic oak groves meant certain death, since the Druids were wont to grab intruders, shove them into a basket called the Wicker Woman, and burn them alive to the accompaniment of prayers, chants, and incantations. The groundless rumour and foolish superstition, it turned out, had dogged the Druids, resolutely keeping up, never lagging more than 2 furlongs behind. Further conversation was interrupted by 9 soldiers in black uniforms with the sign of the sun on their spaulders, armed with guise. "Would you be," asked the sergeant, commanding the soldiers, tapping his calf with an oaken truncheon, "the witcher Geralt?" "Yes," Geralt answered after a moment's reflection. "I would. You'll be coming along with me, then?" "How can you be sure I will? Am I under arrest?" The soldier looked at him in a seemingly endless silence, but somehow strangely without respect. No doubt his 8-man escort gave him the nerve to look in that manner. "No," he said at last. "You aren't under arrest. I received no order to arrest you. If I'd received an order, my question would have been different, sir. Very different." Geralt adjusted his sword belt rather ostentatiously. "And my answer," he said icily, "would have been different too." Now, gentlemen." Dandelion decided to step in, putting on an expression which, in his opinion, was the smile of a seasoned diplomat. "Why that tone? We are honest men. We needn't fear the powers that be. Why, we're willing to help them, whenever the opportunity arises. But by virtue of that, we deserve something from authority, don't we, officer? If only something as tiny as an explanation of why our civic freedoms are being curtailed." "There's a war on, sir," the soldier replied, not in the least bit disconcerted by the torrent of words. "Freedom, as the name suggests, is a matter for peacetime. Any reasons will be elucidated by his lordship the prefect. I carry out orders, so don't get into discussions with me." "Fair enough," the witcher conceded, and gave the troubadour a slight wink. "Then lead us to the prefecture, good soldier. Dandelion, go back to the others and tell them what's happened. Do the necessary. Regis will know what to do." "What's a witcher doing in the slopes? What do you seek?" The person asking the questions was a broad-shouldered, dark-haired man, with a face rutted with scars and a leather patch over his left eye. In a dark alleyway, the sight of that cyclopean face was capable of wresting a moan of terror from many a breast. But how unjust, when it was the face of Mr. Fulco Artevelde, prefect of Riedbrunner, the highest-ranking custodian of law and order in the entire region. "What does a witcher seek in the slopes?" repeated the highest-ranking custodian of law and order in the entire region. Geralt sighed and shrugged, feigning indifference. "You'll know, of course, the answer to your question, Prefect. You could only have gleaned the fact that I'm a witcher from the Riverdale Forest beekeepers, who hired me to protect them on their march. And, being a witcher in the slopes or anywhere else, I'm generally in search of the chance to work. So I'm journeying in the direction suggested by the patrons who hired me." "Logical," Fulco Artevelde nodded. "On the face of it, at least. You parted company with the beekeepers 2 days ago, but you intend to continue your travels southwards in somewhat peculiar company. With what aim?" Geralt didn't lower his eyes, but steadily returned the burning gaze of the prefect's only eye. "Am I under arrest?" "No, not for the time being." "Then the purpose and direction of my travel is my private business." "I suggest frankness and openness nonetheless, if only in order to prove you don't feel in any way guilty, and don't fear either the lore or any authority guarding it. I'll repeat the question. What is behind your expedition, Witcher? Geralt pondered this briefly. I'm trying to reach the Druids, who were abiding in Angren, but have probably moved into these parts. It would have been easy to learn that from the beekeepers I was escorting. Who hired you to deal with the Druids? The guardians of nature haven't burned one too many people in the Vic of Woman, have they? Fairy tales, rumours, superstitions. Strange for an enlightened person like yourself. I want information from the Druids, not their blood. But really, Prefect, it seems to me I've been too frank in order to prove I don't feel guilty. It's not about your guilt. At least, not just about it. I'd like, nevertheless, a tone of mutual congeniality to prevail in our talk. For in spite of appearances, the aim of this talk is, among others, to save you and your companions' lives. You have provoked my sincere curiosity, my Lord Prefect, answered Geralt after some time. Among other things, I shall hear out your explanations with truly rapt attention. I don't doubt it. We'll get to those explanations, but gradually, in stages. Have you ever heard, Master Witcher, of the tradition of turning imperial evidence? Do you know what that is? I do. Weaseling out of one's responsibilities by fingering one's comrades. A gross simplification, Fulco Artevelde said without smiling. Typical, actually, for a Nordling. You often disguise gaps in your education with sarcastic or exaggerated simplifications which you consider witty. Imperial lore operates here in the slopes, Master Witcher. More precisely, Imperial lore is going to operate here when rank lawlessness has been utterly extirpated. The best way to fight lawlessness and criminality is the scaffold, which you surely saw in the town square. But occasionally, the offer to turn Imperial evidence also works. He made a dramatic pause. Geralt didn't interrupt. Quite recently, the Prefect continued, we managed to lure a gang of juvenile criminals into an ambush. The brigands offered resistance and were killed. But not all of them, right? Geralt conjectured bluntly, becoming a little bored by all this oratory. One was taken alive. They were promised a reprieve if they turned Imperial evidence. I mean, if they started grassing. And they grassed me up. Why such a deduction? Have you had any contact with the local criminal underworld? Now, or in the past? No, I haven't. Not now or in the past. So, forgive me, Lord Prefect, but the whole matter is either a complete misunderstanding or humbug, or a trap directed against me. In the latter case, I would suggest we don't waste any more time and proceed to the nub of the matter. It appears that the thought of a trap troubles you, the Prefect observed, furrowing his scarred brow. Could you, perhaps, in spite of your assurances, have some reason to fear the law? No. I'm beginning, though, to fear that the fight against crime is being conducted hurriedly, wholesale, and not meticulously enough, without painstaking inquiries to determine guilt or innocence. But, well, perhaps that's just an exaggerated simplification, typical of a dull Nordling. And this Nordling continues not to understand in what way the Prefect of Ridbruna is saving his life. Fulco Artevelde observed him in silence for a moment, then clapped his hands. Bring her in, he ordered the soldiers, who'd appeared at his signal. Geralt calmed himself with several breaths, for suddenly a certain thought made his heart race and his adrenaline flow. A moment later, he had to take several more breaths, and even, astonishingly, had to make a sign with his hand out of sight beneath the table. And the effect, astonishingly, was none. He felt hot and cold. For the guards had shoved Ciri into the room. Well, I never, said Ciri, right after she'd been sat down in a chair and had her hands handcuffed behind the backrest. Look what the cat's dragged in. Artevelde made a brief gesture. One of the guards, a huge fellow with the face of a slow-witted child, drew his arm back in an unhurried swing and struck Ciri in the face so hard it made the chair rock. Forgive her, your lordship, said the guard apologetically and astonishingly mildly. She is young and foolish, skittish. Angoulême, Artevelde said slowly and emphatically. I promised you I'd hear you out. But I meant I'd listen to your answers to my questions, not to your badinage. You will be rebuked for your lack of respect. Understand? Sure, nuncle. The gesture, the slap, the chair rocked. Young, mumbled the guard, rubbing his hand on his hip. Skittish. From the young woman's snub nose, Geralt could see now that it wasn't Ciri, and was astonished at his mistake. Trickled a thin stream of blood. The young woman sniffed hard and smiled predatorily. Angoulême, the prefect repeated. Do you understand me? Yes, sir, Mr. Fulco. Who's this, Angoulême? The girl sniffed again, inclined her head and fixed Geralt with her huge eyes. Hazel, not green. Then she shook her untidy mane of flaxen hair, causing it to fall onto her forehead in unruly locks. Never seen him before. She licked the blood which dripped onto her lip. But I know who he is. Anyway, I already told you that, Mr. Fulco. Now you know I wasn't lying. His name's Geralt. He's a witcher. He crossed the Yaruga about 10 days ago, and he's heading for Toussaint. Right, my white-haired nuncle? She's young, skittish, said the guard quickly, looking somewhat anxiously at the prefect. But Fulco Artevelde just grimaced and shook his head. You'll still be fooling about on the scaffold, Angoulême. Very well, let's go on. With whom, according to you, was Geralt the Virtua travelling? I've already told you that, too. With a comely fellow called Dandelion, who's a troubadour and carries a lute, and a young woman who has dark, blonde, chin-length hair. I don't know her name. And another man without a description. His name wasn't mentioned either. 4 of them in all. Geralt rested his chin on his knuckles, observing the girl with interest. Angoulême didn't lower her gaze. What eyes you have, she said. Creepy peepers. Continue, Angoulême, continue, Mr. Fulco urged, scowling. Who else belonged to this Vitre's cohort? No one. I said there were 4 of them. Not been listening, nuncle. The gesture, the slap, the trickle. The guard kneaded his hip, but refrained from any more comments about the skittishness of youth. You lie, Angoulême, said the prefect. How many of them are there? I ask for the second time. Whatever you say, Mr. Fulco, whatever you say. As you wish. There's 200 of them, 300, 600. Lord Prefect. Geralt forestalled the order to strike. Let's leave it, if we may. What she said is precise enough to show she's not lying, at most lacking in information. But where did she get her facts? She declared she's never seen me before. It's the first time I've seen her too, I give my word. Thank you. Artevelde frowned at him. For your help with the investigation, how valuable. Then I start interrogating you. I count on your being equally eloquent. Angoulême, did you hear what the gentleman said? Speak, and don't make me encourage you. It was said, replied the girl, as she licked the blood dripping from her nose, that if the authorities were informed about a planned crime, if it was revealed who was planning villainy, there'd be clemency. So I'm telling you, ain't I? I know about a crime being prepared, and I want to forestall the evil deed. Listen to what I say. Nightingale and his Hanser are waiting in Belhaven for this here witcher, and are planning to club him to death there. A half-elf gave them the contract. A stranger. No one knows where the hell he's from. No one knows him. The half-elf said it all. Who he is, what he looks like, where he's from, when he'll arrive, in what company. He warned that the witch is no mug, but an old hand, so not to play the hero, but stab him in the back, down him with a crossbow, or better yet, poison him, if he eats or drinks somewhere in Belhaven. The half-elf gave Nightingale some money, a lot of money, and promised there'll be more after the job's done. After it's done, Fulco Artevelde remarked. So, the half-elf is still in Belhaven? With Nightingale's gang? Perhaps. I don't know. It's over a fortnight since I escaped from Nightingale's hands. So would that be the reason you're grassing them up? The Witcher smiled. Settling scores. The young woman's eyes narrowed, and her swollen mouth twisted. Leave my sodding scores out of this, nuncle. and me grassing is saving your life, right? Some thanks would be in order. Thank you. Geralt again prevented the beating. I only meant to remark that if you're settling scores, it diminishes your credibility to turn imperial evidence. People grass to save their skin and their life, but they lie when they want revenge. Our Angoulême has no chance of saving her life, Fulco Artevelde interjected. But she wants, naturally, to save her skin. To me, that's an absolutely credible motive. Well, Angoulême, you do want to save your skin, don't you? The girl pursed her lips and visibly blanched. The boldness of a criminal, said the prefect contemptuously, and of a snot-nosed kid at the same time. Swoop down in numbers, rob the weak, kill the defenseless, oh yes. Look death in the eye? Not so easy. That's beyond you. We shall see, she snarled. We shall, nodded Fulco gravely, and we shall hear. You'll bellow your lungs out on the scaffold, Angoulême. You promised me clemency. And I shall keep my promise, if what you have testified proves to be the truth. Angoulême jerked on the chair, pointing at Geralt with a movement seemingly of her whole slim body. And that? She yelled. What's that? Isn't that the truth? Let him deny he's a witcher and he's Geralt. Let him say I'm not credible. Let him ride to Belhaven and you'll have better proof that I'm not lying. You'll find his corpse in some gutter in the morning. But then you'll say I didn't prevent a crime, so the clemency'll still come to nothing. That right? You're fucking swindlers. Nothing but swindlers. Don't hit her, said Geralt. Please. There was something in his voice that checked the raised hands of the prefect and the guard. Angoulême sniffed, looking at him piercingly. Thanks, Nuncle, she said, but beating's nothing much. If they won't, let him carry on. I've been beaten since a child. I'm used to it. If you want to be kind, confirm I'm telling the truth. Let them keep their word. Let them sodding hang me. Take her away, Fulco ordered, quietening Geralt, who was about to protest with a gesture. She is of no use to us, he explained once they were alone. I know everything, and you shall have your explanations, and then I shall ask for reciprocity. First of all, the witch's voice was cold. Explain what that noisy exit was all about, ending with that curious request to be hanged. If she's turned imperial evidence, the girl's done her work, hasn't she? Not yet. How is that? Homer Stragan, nicknamed Nightingale, is an exceptionally dangerous scoundrel. Cruel and brazen, cunning and clever, and a lucky rogue. His impunity emboldens others. I must put an end to it, which is why I made a deal with Angoulême. I promised her that if, as a result of her testimony, Nightingale is captured and his gang broken up, she will hang. I beg your pardon. The witch's astonishment was genuine. Is that what you call turning imperial evidence here? The noose in exchange for collaboration with the authorities. And what for refusing to collaborate? Impalement, preceded by gouging out the eyes and tearing the bosom with red-hot pincers. The witcher didn't say a word. It is called exemplary terror, Fulco Artevelde continued. Absolutely imperative in the fight against crime. Why do you clench your fist so hard I can almost hear your knuckles grinding? Perhaps you favor humane killing? You can afford that luxury. You mainly fight creatures which, however ridiculous it sounds, also kill humanely. I cannot afford it. I've seen merchants' convoys and homes pillaged by Nightingale and his like. I've seen what's done to people to make them reveal hiding places or magical passwords to jewel cases and strongboxes. I've seen the women Nightingale has taken a knife to, just to check they weren't concealing valuables. I've seen worse things done to people simply for the sake of wanton amusement. Angoulême, whose faith moves you so, took part in such merriment. That is certain. She was in the gang long enough, and were it not for sheer accident and the fact she fled the gang, no one would have found out about the ambush in Belhaven, and you would have learned of it some other way. Perhaps she'd have shot you in the back with a crossbow. I don't like speculation. Do you know why she fled the gang? Her evidence in that regard was vague, and she didn't want to divulge it to my men. But it's no secret that Nightingale is one of those men who restrict women to let us say, primitively natural role. If he can't do it any other way, he forces that role on women. Certainly, generational conflicts contributed to it. Nightingale is a mature man, while Angoulême's last gang were urchins like her. But those are speculations. In actual fact, it interests me not. And why, may I ask, do you care? Why has Angoulême evoked such interest from the moment you saw her? Strange question. The girl informs me about an attempt on my life being planned by her former comrades on the orders of some half-elf. A sensational matter in itself, since I have no long-standing feuds with any half-elves. The girl knows only too well what company I ride with, including such details as the troubadour being called Dandelion, and that the woman had cut off her plait. That plait, particularly, makes me suspect lies or a trap in this. It wouldn't have been hard to seize and question one of the forest beekeepers I've been journeying with for the last week, and swiftly stage "That will do." Artevelde slammed his fist on the table. You raised too far ahead, sir. You're accusing me of engineering something here. To what end? To deceive or ensnare you? And who are you that you so fear provocation and ensnarement? Only the thief fears the truth, my Lord Witcher. Only the thief. Give me another explanation. No, you give me one, sir. Regrettably, I have none. I might say something. The prefect smiled maliciously. But for what? Let's be clear. I'm not interested in who wants to see you dead or why. I don't care where that person came by such interesting information about you, including your comrade's hair color and length. I shall go further. I might have not informed you at all about the plot on your life, Witcher. I could simply have treated your company as utterly ignorant bait for Nightingale. Lurked, waited until the Nightingale swallowed the hook, line, and sinker, and then seized him as my own. For it's him I'm interested in. Him I want. And if you met your maker, a necessary evil, incidental. He fell silent. Geralt made no comment. Know you, Master Witcher, the prefect continued after a pause, that I swore to myself that the law would rule on my turf, at any cost, and using any methods, per fas et nefas. For the law is not jurisprudence, not a weighty tome full of articles, not philosophical treatises, not peevish nonsense about justice, not hackneyed platitudes about morality and ethics. The law means safe paths and highways. It means back streets one can walk along, even after sundown. It means inns and taverns one can leave to visit the privy, leaving one's purse on the table and one's wife beside it. The law is the sleep of people certain they'll be woken by the crowing of the rooster, and not the crashing of burning roof timbers. And for those who break the law, the noose, the axe, the stake, and the red-hot iron. Punishments which deter others. Those that break the law should be caught and punished, using all available means and methods. Eh, Witcher? Is the disapproval written on your countenance a reaction to the intention or the methods? The methods, I think, for it's easy to criticize methods, but we would all prefer to live in a safe world, wouldn't we? Go on, answer. There's nothing to say. Oh, I believe there is. Mr. Fulco, Geralt said calmly, the world you envision quite pleases me. Indeed? Your expression suggests otherwise. The world you envision is made for a witcher. A witcher would never be short of work in it. Instead of codes, articles, and peevish platitudes about justice, your idea creates lawlessness, anarchy, the license and self-serving of princelings and mandarins, the officiousness of careerists wanting to endear themselves to their superiors, the blind vindictiveness of fanatics, the cruelty of assassins, retribution and sadistic vengeance. Your vision is a world where people are afraid to venture out after dark, not for fear of cutthroats, but of the guardians of public order. For, after all, the result of all great crackdowns on miscreants is always that the miscreants enter the ranks of the guardians of public order en masse. Your vision is a world of bribery, blackmail and entrapment, a world of turning imperial evidence and false witnesses, a world of snoopers and coerced confessions, informing and the fear of being informed upon. And inevitably, the day will come in your world when the flesh of the wrong person will be torn with pincers, when an innocent person is hanged or impaled. And then it will be a world of crime. In short, he finished, a world where a witcher would be in his element. Well, well, Fulco Artevelde said after a moment's silence, rubbing his eye socket through the leather patch. An idealist. A witcher. A professional. A hired killer. But an idealist nonetheless. And a moralist. That's dangerous in your profession, Witcher. A sign you begin to outgrow your profession. One day you'll hesitate to dispatch a Striga. For what if it's innocent? What if it's blind vengeance and blind fanaticism? I don't wish it on you. But what if, one day... I don't wish this on you either, though it is possible. What if someone close to you is harmed in a cruel and sadistic way? Then I'd willingly return to this conversation, to the issue of the punishment fitting the crime. Who knows if we would then differ so greatly in our views? But today, here, now, that is not the subject of our consideration or discussion. Today we shall talk about hard facts, and you're a hard fact. Geralt raised an eyebrow slightly. Though you were scornful about my methods and my vision of a world of law, you shall aid me, my dear Witcher, in the fulfilling of that vision. I repeat, I swore to myself that those who break the law will get their just deserts, all of them. From the minor felon who cheats with dishonest scales at the market to he who swipes a cargo of bows and arrows meant for the army on the highway. Highwaymen, cutpurses, thieves, robbers, terrorists from the Free Slopes organization who grandly call themselves freedom fighters. And Nightingale, above all, Nightingale. A fitting punishment must befall Nightingale. The method is inconsequential, as long as it's quick, before an amnesty is declared and he weasels out. Witcher, I've been waiting months for something that'll let me get one step ahead of him, that'll let me nudge him, make him trip up and make the decisive error which will be his undoing. Shall I continue, or do you follow? I do, but go on. The mysterious half-elf, seemingly the initiator and instigator of the attempt, warned Nightingale about a Witcher, advocated caution, advised against a cavalier attitude or swaggering arrogance and bravado. I know he had his reasons. The warning will come to nothing, though. Nightingale will make a mistake. He will attack a Witcher who has been forewarned and is prepared to defend himself. A Witcher who is waiting to be attacked, and it'll be the end of the robber Nightingale. I wish to strike a bargain with you, Geralt. You shall be my informer. Don't interrupt. It's a simple agreement. Each side will meet their obligations. You put paid to Nightingale, while in exchange I... He was silent for a while, smiling slyly. I shan't ask you who you are, where you're from, or where and why you journey. I shan't ask why one of you speaks with a barely detectable Nilfgaardian accent, and why sometimes dogs and horses bristle at your party's approach. I shan't order the roll of papers to be taken from the troubadour Dandelion, nor shall I check what they say. And I shall only inform Imperial counterintelligence about you when Nightingale is dead or in my dungeon. Or even later. Why hurry? I'll give you time and a chance. A chance to do what? To reach Toussaint, that ridiculous fairy-tale duchy whose borders even the Nilfgaardian counterintelligence don't dare violate. And then much may change. There'll be an amnesty, there may be a truce on the far side of the Yaruga, maybe even lasting peace. The Witcher was silent for a long time. The prefect's disfigured face was unmoving. His eye shone. Agreed, Geralt finally said. Without haggling? Without conditions? I have too. How could it be otherwise? Go on. I must first ride west for a few days. To Loch Monduin. To the Druids. Are you making an ass of me? Fulco Artevelde interrupted abruptly. Do you mean to gull me? West? Everyone knows where your route takes you, including Nightingale, who is right now laying an ambush on your road. To the south, in Belhaven, at the spot where the Navy Valley cuts the Sans Retour Valley, leading to Toussaint. Does that mean that the Druids aren't by Loch Monduin? No, nor have they been for almost a month. They headed down the Sans Retour Valley to Toussaint under the protective wings of Duchess Anarietta of Beauclair, who has a weakness for freaks, loonies, and oddballs, who gladly gives asylum to such in her little fairy-tale land. You know that as well as I do, Witcher. Don't try to dupe me. I won't try, Geralt said slowly. I give you my word that I won't. I set out for Belhaven tomorrow. Haven't you forgotten something? No, I haven't forgotten. My second condition. I want Angoulême. You'll rush through her amnesty and release her from the dungeon. This Witcher informer needs your informer. Quickly, do you agree or not? I do. Fulco Artevelde replied almost at once. I have no choice. Angoulême is yours, for I know you're only cooperating for her sake. The vampire riding at Geralt's side listened attentively and didn't interrupt. The Witcher wasn't disappointed by his perspicacity. There are 5 of us, not 4, he concluded, as soon as Geralt had finished his account. We've been travelling in a group of 5 since the end of August. The 5 of us crossed the Eruga, and Milva only cut off her plait in Riverdale about a week ago. Your fair-haired protégé knows about Milva's plait, but said 4, not 5. Bizarre. Is that the strangest part of this bizarre story? Far from it. The strangest thing is Belhaven, the town where the ambush has reputedly been laid for us. A town set deep in the mountains, on the path through the Navy Valley and the Theodrila Pass. And we never planned to go there, the Witcher finished, spurring on Roach, who was beginning to fall behind. 3 weeks ago, when that highwayman Nightingale took the job to kill me from some half-elf, we were in Angren, heading to Caidu, fearful of the Ysgith bogs. We didn't even know we'd have to cross the Eruga. Damn it, we didn't know that this morning. We did, the vampire interrupted. We knew we were looking for the Druids. We knew that just as clearly this morning as 3 weeks ago. That mysterious half-elf is preparing an ambush on the road leading to the Druids, certain we'll take that road. He simply has a better idea than us which way that road leads. It was the Witcher's turn to interrupt. How does he? We shall have to ask, which is precisely why you took the prefect's offer, isn't it? Naturally. I'm counting on being able to have a chat with Mr. Half-Elf. Geralt smiled hideously. Before that happens, doesn't any explanation suggest itself to you? Or simply come to mind? The vampire observed him in silence for some time. I don't like what you're saying, Geralt, he said at last. I don't like what you're thinking. I consider it an inopportune thought, taken hurriedly without reflection, resulting from prejudice and resentment. How else can one explain? Anyway, Regis interrupted him with a tone Geralt had never heard from him. Anyway, but like that. Don't you think, for example, there's a possibility your fair-haired protégé is lying? Hey there, nuncle, called Angoulême, riding behind them on the mule called Dracul. Don't accuse me of lying if you can't prove it. I'm not your uncle, dear child, and I'm not your dear child, nuncle. Angoulême. The Witcher turned around in the saddle. Be quiet. If you say so. Angoulême calmed down immediately. You're allowed to give me orders. You got me out of that hole, wrested me from Mr. Fulco's talons. I obey you. You're now the leader, the head of the Hansa. Be quiet, please. Angoulême muttered under her breath, stopped urging Dracul on, and remained at the rear, particularly since Regis and Geralt had put on speed to catch up with Dandelion, Gaia, and Milva, who were riding in the vanguard. They were heading towards the mountains along the bank of the River Navy, whose waters, turbid and yellowish-brown following the last rains, rolled swiftly over rocks and shelves. They weren't alone. They frequently passed or overtook troops of Nilfgaardian cavalry, lone horsemen, settlers' wagons, or merchants' caravans. The Amel Mountains rose up to the south, closer and closer and more menacing, and the pointed needle of Gorgon, Devil Mountain, was enveloped in the clouds, which quickly covered the whole sky. When are you going to tell them? The vampire asked, indicating with a glance the threesome riding ahead of them. When we make camp. Dandelion was the first to speak when Geralt had finished his account. Correct me if I'm wrong, he said, but that girl, Angoulême, whom you have so cheerfully and carelessly added to our company, is a criminal. To save her from her well-deserved penalty, you've agreed to collaborate with the Nilfgaardians. You've hired yourself out. Why, not just yourself. You've hired us all out. We are all to assist the Nilfgaardians capture or kill somebody, some local brigand. In short, you, Geralt, have become a Nilfgaardian mercenary, a bounty hunter, a hired assassin. And we've been promoted to the rank of your acolytes, or perhaps your family. You have an incredible talent for oversimplification, Dandelion, Kair muttered. Have you really not understood what this is about? Or are you just talking for talking's sake? Silence, Nilfgaardian. Geralt? Let me begin by saying, the Witcher threw a stick he'd been playing with for some time onto the fire, that no one's forced to help me with my plans. I can handle it by myself, without acolytes or famuli. Your audacious nuncle, Angoulême began, but Nightingale's Hansa numbers 24 stout blades. They won't take fright at a Witcher, and where it concerns swordsmanship, even if it were true what they say about witches, no witch could deal with 24 by himself. You saved my life, so I'll repay you likewise, with a warning, and with help. What the bloody hell is a Hansa? In Hansa, Kair explained. In our tongue, it's an armed gang, but one linked by bonds of friendship. A company? Precisely. I see the word has entered the local slang here. A Hansa's a Hansa, Angoulême interrupted. In our lingo, a gang or hussar. What are we on about here? That was a serious warning. One man has no chance against the entire Hansa. To make matters worse, one who knows neither Nightingale nor anyone in Belhaven or the surroundings, neither foes, friends nor allies, who knows not the roads leading to the town, and there are various. I say the Witcher won't cope. I don't know what customs prevail among you, but I won't leave the Witcher alone. As Nuncle Dandelion said, he cheerfully and carelessly took me into your company, even though I'm a criminal. My hair still stinks of the cell. There was no way of washing it. The Witcher and no other got me out of that cell and into the daylight. I'm grateful to him for that, which is why I won't leave him alone. I'll lead him to Belhaven, to Nightingale and that half-elf. I'm going with him. Me too, Kaia said at once. And me and all, Milva barked. Dandelion pressed to his chest the tube with the manuscripts, which lately he wouldn't be parted from for a single moment. He lowered his head. He was evidently struggling with his thoughts, and the thoughts were winning. Stop meditating, poet, Regis said kindly, for there's nothing to be ashamed of. You're even less cut out to participate in a bloody sword fight than I am. We weren't taught to carve up our neighbours with a blade. Furthermore, I'm... He raised his shining eyes towards the Witcher and Milva. I'm a coward, he confessed curtly. If it's not necessary, I don't want to go through what we had on the ferry and the bridge again. Never. For which reason, I request to be left out of the fighting team heading to Belhaven. You looked me from that ferry and that bridge on your back, Milva began softly, when infirmity robbed me of my legs. If there'd been a coward there, instead of you, he'd have left me and fled. There was no coward, though. Only you, Regis. Well said, Auntie, said Angoulême with conviction. I have no clue what you're on about, but well said. I'm no aunt of yours. Milva's eyes flashed ominously. Have a care, miss. If you call me that again, you'll see. What will I see? Quiet, the Witcher barked harshly. That's enough, Angoulême. I need to take all of you to task, I see. The time of lurching blindly towards the horizon is over. For now, there might be something just over the horizon. The time for decisive action has arrived. Time for throats to be cut. For at last there's someone to attack. Those who haven't understood till now, let them understand. We finally have a clear-cut enemy within reach. The half-elf who wants us dead is an agent of forces hostile to us. Thanks to Angoulême, we've been forewarned, and forewarned is forearmed, as the proverb has it. I have to get my hands on that half-elf and wring from him whose orders he's acting on. Do you finally understand, Dandelion? I'd say, the poet began calmly, that I understand more and better than you. Without any attacking or wringing needed, I surmise that the mysterious half-elf is acting on Dijkstra's orders, the same Dijkstra you lamed on Thaneth by smashing his ankle. Following Marshal Visigurd's report, Dijkstra doubtless considers us Nilfgaardian spies, And, following our flight from the core of Lyrian partisans, Queen Maeve has assuredly added a few points to the list of our crimes. You're mistaken, Dandelion, Regis softly interjected. It's not Dijkstra, or Visigerd, or Maeve. Then who? Any judgment or conclusion now would be premature. Agreed, the Witcher drawled icily, which is why the matter needs to be examined in situ, and conclusions drawn first-hand. And I, Dandelion said, not giving up, still judge it a stupid and risky idea. It's good we've been warned about the ambush, that we know about it. Now that we know, let's give it a wide berth. Let that elf, or half-elf, wait for us as long as he wishes, and we'll hurry along our own road. No, the Witcher interrupted. That's the end of the discussion, my little chicks. The end of anarchy. The time has come for our Hansa to have a ringleader. Everyone, not excluding Angoulême, looked at him in expectant silence. Angoulême, Milver and I, he said, will make for Belhaven. Caer, Regis and Dandelion will ride into the Sanzratua Valley and go to Toussaint. No, Dandelion said quickly, gripping his tube more tightly. Not a chance. I can't. Shut up. This isn't a debate. It was an order from the Hansa's leader. You're going to Toussaint with Regis and Caer. You'll wait for us there. Toussaint means death for me, the troubadour declared emphatically. If I'm recognized in Beauclair at the castle, I'm dead. I have to tell you. No, you don't, the Witcher interrupted bluntly. It's too late. You could have turned back, but you didn't want to. You remained in the company in order to rescue Ciri. Am I right? You are? So, you'll ride with Regis and Caer down the Sanzratua Valley. You'll wait for us in the mountains without crossing the Toussaint border for now. But if the necessity arises, you'll have to cross it. For the Druids, the ones from Caid-Du, Regis's acquaintances, are allegedly in Toussaint. So, if the necessity arises, you'll get information about Ciri from the Druids and set off to get her. Alone. What do you mean alone? Do you anticipate? I'm not anticipating. I'm bearing in mind the possibility. Just in case, so to speak. As a last resort, if you prefer. Perhaps it'll all go well and we won't have to show up in Toussaint. But in the event, well, then it's important that a Nilfgaardian force doesn't follow you to Toussaint. Well, it won't, Angoulême cut in. It's strange, but Nilfgaard respects Toussaint's marches. I've hidden from pursuers there before, but the knights there are no better than the Blackcloaks, refined and courteous in their speech, but quick to seize the sword or lance, and they patrol the marches ceaselessly. They're called knights errant. They ride alone or in twos or threes, and they persecute the rabble, which means us. Witcher, one detail needs changing in your plans. What? If we are to make for Belhaven and cross swords with Nightingale, you and Sir Caer should go with me, and let Auntie go with them. Why so? Geralt calmed Milver with a gesture. You need men for that job. Why are you raging, Auntie? I know what I'm talking about. When the time comes, it may be necessary to act with menace rather than force itself. And none of Nightingale's Hansa will be scared of a band of 3, where there are 2 women to 1 man. Milver rides with us. Geralt clenched his fingers around the archer's forearm, who was genuinely infuriated. Milver, not Caer. I don't want to ride with Caer. Why's that? Angoulême and Caer asked almost at the same time. Precisely, Regis said slowly. Why? Because I don't trust him, the Witcher said bluntly. The silence which fell was unpleasant, weighty, almost tangible. From the forest, near which a merchant's caravan and a group of other travellers had made camp, came raised voices, shouts and singing. Explain, Caer said at last. Somebody has betrayed us, the Witcher said dryly. After our conversation with the prefect and Angoulême's revelations, there's no doubt about it. And if one thinks it over carefully, one comes to the conclusion that there's a traitor among us, and it takes little pondering to guess who. It seems to me, Caer frowned, that you have taken the liberty to suggest that the traitor is me? I don't deny that such a thought has occurred to me. The Witcher's voice was cold. There's much to suggest it. It would explain much, very much. Geralt, said Dandelion, Aren't you going a mite too far? Let him speak. Kair curled his lip. Let him speak. Let him feel free. It puzzled us. Geralt swept his gaze over his companions' faces. How there could have been an error in the reckoning. You know what I'm talking about. That there are 5 of us and not 4. We thought someone had simply made a mistake. The mysterious half-elf, the brigand Nightingale, or Angoulême. But if we reject that, then the following possibility suggests itself. The company numbers 5, but Nightingale is only meant to kill 4, because the 5th is the assassin's accomplice. Someone who keeps them constantly informed about the company's movements. From the start, from the moment the celebrated fish soup was eaten and the company was formed. And we invited an elf guardian to join us. An elf guardian who must catch Ciri, must hand her over to Emperor Emir, for his life and further career depends on it. So I wasn't wrong then, Kaia said slowly. I'm a traitor after all. A lousy, two-faced turncoat? Geralt, Regis began again, excuse my frankness, but your theory is riddled with holes, and your thought, as I've already told you, is inopportune. I'm a traitor, Kaia repeated, as though he hadn't heard the vampire's words. As I understand it, however, there is no proof of it, only vague circumstantial evidence and the witch's speculations. As I understand it, the burden of proving my own innocence falls on me. So I'll have to prove I'm not what I appeared to be. Is that right? Don't be pompous, Nilfgaardian, snapped Geralt, standing before Kaia and glaring at him. If I had proof of your guilt, I wouldn't be wasting time talking. I'd have filleted you like a herring already. Do you know the principle of cui bono? So answer me. Who, aside from you, had even the slightest reason to betray me? Who, aside from you, would have gained anything from it? A loud and long-drawn-out crack resounded from the merchant's camp. A firework exploded in a burst of red and gold. Rockets shot out a swarm of golden bees, and coloured rain fell against the black sky. I'm not what I appear, said the young Nilfgaardian in a powerful, resonant voice. Unfortunately, I can't prove it. But I can do something else. Do what befits me, what I have to do when I'm being slandered and insulted, when my honour is besmirched and my dignity sullied. His attack was as swift as lightning, but it still wouldn't have surprised the Witcher had it not been for Geralt's aching knee, which hampered his movements. Geralt was unable to dodge, and the gloved fist smashed him in the jaw with such force he fell backwards and tumbled straight into the campfire, throwing up clouds of sparks. He leapt up, too slow again owing to the pain in his knee. Kair was already upon him. Again the Witcher didn't even manage to duck. The fist rammed into the side of his head, and colourful fireworks flared up in his eyes, even more glorious than the ones the merchants had set off. Geralt swore and pounced on Kair, wrapped his arms around him, and knocked him to the ground. They rolled around in the gravel, thumping and pummelling each other. And all in the eerie and unnatural light of the fireworks bursting in the sky. "Stop it!" Dandelion yelled. "Stop it, you bloody fools!" Kair artfully knocked the ground out from under Geralt and smote him in the teeth as he was trying to get up, and punched him again. Geralt crouched, tensed, and kicked him, not in his crotch where he had aimed, but in the thigh. They grappled again, fell and rolled over, thumping one another wherever they could, blinded by the punches and the dust and sand getting into their eyes. Then suddenly they came apart, rolling in opposite directions, cowering and shielding their heads from the blows raining down on them. Having unfastened her sturdy leather belt, Milva had seized it by the buckle, wound it around her fist, fallen on the fighters, and begun to flog them with lusty blows with all her might, sparing neither the strap nor her arm. The belt whistled and fell with a dry crack, first on Kair's, then on Geralt's arms, back, and shoulders. When they parted, Milva hopped from one to the other like a grasshopper, thrashing them evenly, so that neither of them received any less or any more than the other. "You thickheads!" she yelled, cracking Geralt across the back. "You doltish dolts! I'll teach you both a lesson!" "Enough!" she yelled even louder, lashing Kair's arms with which he was shielding his head. "Had enough! Calm down now!" "Stop!" the Witcher howled. "Enough!" "Enough!" echoed Kair, who was huddled up in a ball. "That'll do." "That will suffice," said the vampire. That really will suffice, Milva." The archer was panting heavily, wiping her forehead with her fist, belt still wound around it. "Bravo," said Angoulême. "Bravo, Auntie." Milva turned on her heel and thrashed her across the shoulders with all her might. Angoulême screamed, sat down, and burst into tears. "I told you," Milva puffed, "not to call me that. I told you." "It's all right." In a somewhat shaking voice, Dandelion reassured the merchants and travellers who'd run over from the neighbouring campfires. "Just a misunderstanding between friends. A lover's tiff. It's already been patched up." The Witcher probed a wobbly tooth with his tongue and spat out the blood dripping from his cut lip. He felt the welts beginning to rise on his back and shoulders, and his ear, which had been lashed by the strap, seeming to swell to the dimensions of a cauliflower. Beside him, Caer clumsily hauled himself up from the ground, holding his cheek. Broad red marks quickly spread over his exposed forearm. Rain, smelling of sulphur, ash from the last firework, was falling on the ground. Angoulême sobbed woefully, holding her shoulders. Milva threw aside her belt, then, after a moment's hesitation, knelt, embraced, and hugged her without a word. "I suggest," said the vampire frigidly, "that you shake hands. I suggest never, ever revisiting this matter." Unexpectedly, a gale came down from the mountains in whispered gusts, in which it seemed some kind of ghastly howling, crying and wailing could be heard. The clouds, being blown across the sky, took on fantastic shapes as the crescent moon turned as red as blood. They were woken before dawn by a furious chorus of goatsucker nightjars and the whirring of their wings. They set off just after the rising of the sun, which later lit up the snows on the mountain peaks with blinding flame. They had left much earlier than that, before the sun had appeared from behind the peaks. Actually, before it appeared, the sky had become overcast. They rode amongst forests, and the road led higher and higher, which was discernible in the tree species. The oak and hornbeam finished abruptly, and they rode into a gloom of beech lined with fallen leaves, smelling of mould, cobwebs, and mushrooms. The mushrooms were in abundance. The damp year-end had yielded a plentiful harvest. In places, the forest floor literally vanished beneath the caps of ceps, morels, and agarics. The beechwood was quiet, and looked as though most of the songbirds had flown away to their mysterious winter haven. Only crows at the edge of the undergrowth cawed, feathers dripping. Then the beech ended and spruce replaced it. The scent of resin filled the air. More and more often they encountered bald hillocks and stone runs where they were caught by strong winds. The river Nevi foamed over steps and cascades. Its water, in spite of the rain, had turned crystal clear. Gorgon loomed up on the horizon, ever closer. All year long, glaciers and snows flowed from the angular sides of the huge mountain, which meant Gorgon always looked as though it were clad in white sashes. The peak of Devil Mountain was constantly swathed in veils of clouds, like the head and neck of an enigmatic bride. Sometimes, though, Gorgon shook her white raiment like a dancer. The sight was breathtaking, but brought death. Avalanches ran from the peak's sheer walls, wiping out everything in their path, down to the scree at the foot and further down the hillside, to the highest spruce stands above the Theodula Pass, above the Navy and Sansratur valleys, above the black circles of mountain tarns. The sun, which in spite of everything had managed to penetrate the clouds, set much too quickly. It simply hid behind the mountains to the west, setting light to them with a purple and golden glow. They stopped for the night. The sun rose, and the time came for them to part. Milva carefully wrapped a silk scarf around her head. Regis put on his hat. Yet again, Geralt checked the position of the scythe on his back and the daggers in his boots. Beside them, Caer was whetting his long Nilfgaardian sword. Angoulême tied a woolen band around her forehead and slipped a hunting knife, a present from Milva, into her boot. The archer and Regis saddled up their horses. The vampire handed Angoulême the reins to his black, while he mounted the mule, Dracul. They were ready. Only one thing remained to be taken care of. Come here, everybody. They approached. Caer, son of Caelach, Geralt began, trying not to sound pompous. I wronged you with unfounded suspicion and behaved shabbily towards you. I hereby apologize before everyone, with bowed head. I apologize and ask you to forgive me. I also ask you all for forgiveness, as I shouldn't have made you watch or listen to it. I vented my fury and resentment on Caer and all of you. It was caused by knowing who betrayed us. I know who betrayed and abducted Ciri, whom we aim to rescue. I'm angry because I'm talking about a person who was once very close to me. Where we are, what we're planning, what routes we're taking and whither we're heading, all was uncovered with the help of scanning, detecting magic. It's none too difficult for a mistress of magic to remotely detect and observe a person who was once well known and close, with whom they had a long-term psychic contact which permits the creation of a matrix. But the sorcerer and sorceress of whom I speak made a mistake. They've revealed themselves. They made an error when counting the members of the company, and that error betrayed them. Tell them, Regis.
Geralt may be right, Regis said slowly. Like every vampire, I'm invisible to magical visual probing and scanning. That is, to a detecting spell. A vampire may be tracked using an analytical spell from close up, but it is not possible to detect a vampire with a remote scanning spell. The detection will report that there's no one there. Thus, only a sorcerer could be mistaken regarding us, to register 4 people where there were actually 5. That is, 4 people and 1 vampire.
We shall exploit the sorcerer's error, the Witcher continued. Caer, Angoulême and I shall ride to Belhaven to talk to the half-elf who hired assassins to kill us. We won't ask the half-elf on whose orders he's acting, for we know that already. We'll ask him where the sorcerers on whose orders he is acting are. When we learn their location, we'll go there and exact our revenge.
Everybody was silent.
We stopped counting the date, so we haven't even noticed it's the 25th of September. 2 days ago, it was the night of the equinox. The equinox. Yes, that's exactly the night you're thinking about. I see your dejection. I see what your eyes are saying. We received a signal that dreadful night when the merchants camping beside us were keeping their courage up with aquavitae, singing and fireworks. You probably had a less distinct sense of foreboding than Caer and I, but you're speculating too. You suspect, and I'm afraid your suspicions are well-founded.
The crows flying over the moorland cawed.
Everything indicates that Ciri is dead. She perished 2 nights ago at the equinox. Somewhere far from here, alone amongst hostile people, strangers. And all that's left to us is vengeance. A cruel and bloody revenge about which stories will still be told 100 years hence. Stories which folk will be afraid to listen to after nightfall, and the hand of any who would repeat such a crime will tremble at the thought of our vengeance. We shall give a horrible example of terror, using the ways of Mr. Fulco Artiveldi, wise Mr. Fulco, who knows how blackguards and scoundrels should be treated. The illustration of terror we shall give will astonish even him. So let us begin, and may hell assist us. Caer, Angoulême, to horse. We ride up the Navy towards Belhaven. Dandelion, Milver, Regis, make for Sans Retour towards Toussaint's borders. You won't get lost. Gorgon will point the way. Goodbye.
Ciri stroked the black cat, which had returned to the cottage in the swamp, as is customary with all cats in the world, when its love of freedom and dissolution had been undermined by cold, hunger, and discomfort. Now it was lying in the girl's lap and arching its back against her hand with a purr signifying profound bliss. The cat couldn't have cared less about what the girl was saying. "It was the only time I dreamed of Geralt," Ciri began. "From the time we parted on the Isle of Thaneth, from the Tower of the Seagull, I'd never seen him in a dream. So I thought he was dead. And then suddenly came that dream, like the ones I used to have, dreams which Yennefer said were prophetic, precognitive, that they either show the past or the future. That was the day before the equinox, in a small town whose name I don't recall, in a cellar where Bonnart had locked me, after he'd flogged me and made me admit who I am.
Did you divulge to him who you are? Visigotta raised his head. Did you tell him everything?
I paid for my cowardice. She swallowed, with humiliation and self-contempt.
Tell me about your dream.
In it, I saw a mountain, lofty, sheer, and sharp like a stone knife. I saw Geralt. I heard what he was saying, exactly. Every word, as though he were with me. I remember I wanted to call out and say it wasn't like that at all, that none of it was true, that he'd made an awful mistake, that he'd got everything wrong, that it wasn't the equinox yet, so even if I happened to have died on the equinox, he shouldn't have declared me dead earlier, when I was still alive. And he shouldn't have accused Yennefer or said such things about her.
She was silent for a time, stroking the cat and sniffing hard.
But I couldn't say a word. I couldn't even breathe, as though I was drowning. And I awoke. The last thing I saw, that I recall from that dream, was 3 riders, Geralt and 2 others, galloping along a ravine with water gushing from its walls.
Visigotta said nothing. Had someone crept up to the shack with the sunken, moss-grown thatched roof after nightfall? Had they peered through the gaps in the shutters, they would have seen a grey-bearded old man listening raptly to a story told by an ashen-haired girl in the dimly lit interior, her cheek disfigured by a nasty scar. They would have seen a black cat lying on the girl's lap, purring lazily, demanding to be stroked, to the delight of the mice scampering around the room. But no one could have seen it, for the cottage with the sunken moss-grown thatched roof was well hidden among the fog in the boundless Periplut marshes, where no one dared to venture. It is well known that when a witcher inflicts pain, suffering, and death, he experiences absolute ecstasy and bliss, such as a devout and normal man only experiences during sexual congress with his wedded spouse, ibidem cum ejaculatio. This leads one to conclude that, also in this matter, a witcher is a creature contrary to nature, an immoral and filthy degenerate, born of the blackest and most foul-smelling hell, since surely only a devil could derive bliss from suffering and pain. Anonymous. Monstrum, or a description of a witcher.